Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk about alternate playstyles, Riot's sort of opinion on them, and basically what I think of their new philosophy towards them that will be coming up in the next few months. Now, if you haven't noticed recently, Riot have been doing a lot of weird things with balance and weird things for specific champions. So, for example, the recent Shyvana buff that happened where she gained additional AP ratios on her abilities and a little bit more of a shift around, so you do a lot more damage on Flame Breath. The jungle Aurelia changes that Riot made specifically because they wanted her to be able to jungle, whereas before they were hesitant about putting him on the kit in the first place. She got the changes anyways. Those sorts of things have been happening with more regularity, I would say, than they have in the past, especially when you look at Kai'Sa, who has very flexible build paths and who can do a lot of different things if she wants to. And that's all been intentional, right? Haven't just happened to do all these things. They've been trying to open up the meta and better support alternative playstyles. So basically, you know, at the moment, there are accepted places where you play every champion. Like, yeah, sure, you could take Darius in the jungle, but he's not really an accepted jungler. You wouldn't expect a Darius to ever be in the jungle. If you see it, you're surprised. So an alternate playstyle is more of, like, let's say Lux support. You're not really surprised to see Lux in the support position. You tend to assume she's mid, but she can go support just as well, and you're not exactly that surprised to see it happen. And so Riot are trying to find more positions like that for champion, and not even necessarily just roles, but even potentially getting champions like Nidalee, who has traditionally been a jungler and a jungler exclusively, back into a solo lane, and even to give champions different ways to build. So something sort of like AP Tristana from yesteryear, where she just kind of jumped on you and bursted you, trying to get those kinds of builds back into the game. Now, I think that, first, this is potentially a good thing. Having new ways to play champions, obviously, is a really, really good thing for the game because it adds more value. If I'm a Master Yi player and Yi is now viable in lane or has a viable AP build, well, I'm significantly more happy because I can play him in more positions. I can have more builds for him. That's kind of cool. Obviously, that's just an example. Please don't bring back AP Yi. So that's really cool, and it also adds a little bit more tactical flexibility, being able to say, you know, I can pick Gragas, and maybe he's jungle, we think he's jungle, but he could be top lane, or he could be mid lane, or he could be some really weird support pick that we haven't seen before. That sort of flexibility people really like having in their champions, and that's kind of a cool thing to see. There are a few pitfalls with this, though, first and foremost being obviously counterplay. We tend to remember a lot of the off builds being really bad because they just had zero counterplay to them whatsoever. Things like AP Tryndamere, AP Rengar, AP Yi, as I mentioned before. Even AP Trist to a certain extent was kind of ridiculous. Those sorts of things are where we run into problems with alternate builds because they just remove the counterplay that a champion originally had. And sure, it's cool that it's an alternate way to play the game, but you have to make sure that there's still some way of fighting back against it. And that can be tricky to design for because when you're designing a champion, you usually start off by saying, you know, this is the champion, this is what they do. By giving them an alternate build, what they do might not have the same strengths and weaknesses as this off build. This off build may have zero weaknesses whatsoever or very hard to exploit weaknesses that remove a lot of the fun in playing against the champion. Obviously, it's fun to play as them, but not as much fun to play against them. So that's the biggest issue facing this potential project from Riot will be making sure that if they do, you know, ridiculous things like make AP Urgot a thing, or if they bring back AD Malzahar, that you keep the counterplay that these champions have, or at the very minimum, you make sure that these alternate playstyles still have some form of counterplay to them and significant clear strengths and weaknesses, because otherwise you end up with champions where, great, it's another AP Tryndamere and there's nothing I can do about that, for example. The other issue that would be is that it kind of undermines pre-game decision-making, because you can't just kind of start off by saying, okay, well, they picked Vlad, so that's going to be top or mid. You know, if ADC Vlad became a thing, for example, well, then you end up feeling kind of cheated or kind of tricked by the system because, well, I don't know where he could be, and there's no possible way for me to evaluate this in advance. I think this is a bit less of an issue because you already kind of see it with champions that can flex between top and mid. When a Swain gets picked, for example, I pretty much have to assume that it could be coming top lane because quite often it is, and then plan accordingly, pick a champion accordingly for that position, because otherwise I'm going to get destroyed by the Swain top that I didn't expect. But the problem with opening up these alternate positions is that there are, I would say, a majority of the roster is pretty decently bound to one position. I think that's a pretty uncontroversial statement. You don't see Kled outside of top lane. You don't see Urgot outside of top lane. You don't see Garen outside of top lane. You don't see Nocturne outside of the jungle. Most of the champions of the game have that going for them. And the few that don't only have one other viable position. So, okay, I know that it's a Vlad. He's going to be top lane. He could be mid lane, but he's probably top lane. And that's usually how it goes too, is there's a probably position and a maybe position for each of these champions. By adding more alternate builds, Riot has the potential to have a champion that can go into multiple different lanes, sort of like the same deal with AP Ezreal and Jungle Ezreal and ADC Ezreal, how he can kind of go all over the place, and also have champions... just have more champions that can go in multiple positions, which again leads to problems because, sure, I'd like to think that's a Shyvana mid, or Shyvana jungle, but it could be Shyvana mid, and that kind of messes with my ability to plan for it in advance. And it definitely hurts the pro scene as well, because pros want to be able to plan for this. They try to say, okay, so they picked their jungler here with the Shyvana, so we're going to go ahead and pick our jungle. And then turns out Shyvana's mid, and instead they're gonna ban out your mid lane picks that you would have played into Shyvana mid. So it definitely makes the pro scene a lot harder too. It could potentially lead to more picks being played in professional play, because you don't know if that champion is going to be played in their intended role. Maybe you need to look for a counter. But so it is sort of a pitfall of this strategy of opening up alternative builds. I think in general, most of these alternative builds aren't going to catch on, is the biggest thing for this project that Riot have said they're trying to do, because it is an alternative playstyle. AP Ezreal will never exceed AD Ezreal in terms of play rate. It's just not going to happen. AD Ezreal is the most consistent way of playing the champion. AP Ezreal is kind of cheesy and does some other weird things. So that sort of a thing it's alternative. It's not really a viable alternative, but it's another way to do it. And so I wonder... the biggest question for me is it worth spending dev time basically supporting these alternative playstyles, trying to get champions into different lanes, different roles, doing different things, or is it more worth time to look forward to other projects, such as getting mages into the bottom lane, for example, or the jungle, something like the jungle changes that have gone onto the PvE recently? Those sorts of things are kind of what I'm wondering about. I'm not necessarily saying, trying to make alternative playstyles is a bad thing, but I do wonder if the dev time wouldn't be better served working on higher priority projects, but higher win projects, I would say. The kind of projects that are going to be well received pretty much regardless, as opposed to, all right, Urgot's got an AP ratio on his shotgun knees now. Whoop-de-doo. But so that's just my opinion on this. I know a lot of people love things like AD Malzahar and the sort. So go ahead and let me know what you guys are thinking of this potential change down in the comment section. I will have Riot Maple's post link down in the description if you want to check out their post as well and what their thoughts are on the subject. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. And if you're looking for more Grab the Lantern content, you can check out my blog, link down in the description. I upload an article each and every single day for your enjoyment. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I will talk to you all later.